Okay, it's 12, so let's get started. My name is Suvidha Bandy. I am a principal planner with the City of Houston Planning Department, and I lead the Livable Places project. It is my honor to welcome you all to this webinar about the Livable Places initiative and its recommendations. The purpose of today's presentation is to update all of you, the design and development community, on the recommendations proposed by the Livable Places Action Committee. Before we get started, some ground rules. Let's all keep our microphones muted and also the cameras turned off until it is your turn to speak or ask questions in the end. If you logged in via the call-in option, please make sure to press *6 to mute or unmute. Anyone seeking AIA credits, please make sure to register and provide your AIA member information during the registration process. I placed the registration link in the chat if you need to do so right now. We will create an automatic attendance report now and also at the end of the webinar, and that report will be used to provide learning credits. With that, let me welcome Tammy Williamson, who's a planner too with the City of Houston Planning Department, and she has worked on this project alongside me and is very experienced and thorough with all of the details. So it's my privilege to invite Tammy Williamson. And before she comes in, I just want to mention that we will take questions in the end. If you do have questions during the process or during the presentation, drop them in the chat and we will answer them in the end. And thank you, Lindsay Williams, for monitoring the chat. So with that, let me welcome Tammy Williamson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tammy Williamson, a planner with the City of Houston. This is a detailed presentation with the specific recommendations from the Livable Places Action Committee, first launched in 2020. As designers and builders, experts in your field, we hope that this information will be useful to you, and we would greatly appreciate your questions and feedback. Livable Places, our latest effort to change Houston's development rules, is all about creating more housing options. Although there is no zoning in Houston, we do have rules for how to develop. For those who don't know, Chapter 42 is the ordinance under which development in the city is governed, and it came into effect in 1982. Of course, we need occasional updates to make sure that the ordinances promote the current city priorities and keep up with the times. As different parts of the city become denser and develop or redevelop, we need to expand our toolbox to address these changes. Livable Places is the latest tool to create opportunities within our development standards that encourage housing variety and affordability. But what does that tool do? It will help to fill in the need to create accessible, diverse, and inclusive neighborhoods with a greater variety of housing and transportation options. It will create safer, more walkable neighborhoods that are less car-dependent and centric with better access to transit and bike facilities. And it'll create a greater variety of affordable housing options for all Houstonians. If these goals sound familiar, it's because Livable Places builds on and is implementing existing planning efforts and community-identified goals. Many of these goals are taken directly from Plan Houston, Resilient Houston, Climate Action Plan, and Complete Communities Actions Plans. Some of these goals are about encouraging responsible growth with safe and viable connections between people and places, and promoting more infill development to grow up, not out. Missing middle is a term in the planning world coined in 2010 to define a range of multifamily or clustered housing types compatible in scale with traditional single-family residential developments. Nationwide, these types of housing are in short supply. Having different types of housing options can help alleviate housing needs, provide infill development at more affordable costs for more market users, and provide density at scale, which is more efficient on infrastructure and transportation systems and can help create vibrant neighborhoods. Livable places will do this while respecting and not overriding any active deed restrictions, nor interfering with minimum lot size and minimum building line ordinances. Livable places is all about proposing and promoting housing options where allowed by deed restrictions. These are housing types that Livable Places is trying to encourage more of or making changes to, which we'll go through them individually. Encouraging these housing types means that we need to reduce parking requirements near high-frequency transit and high-comfort bike facilities to make building these housing types more affordable. This only means that the city won't require parking minimums near transit-served areas. People will be allowed to provide parking based on their needs. For those in the growing demographic in Houston of one car or no car households, this allows for an option in the market in which they can choose not to have to pay for land that can be utilized by something other than pavement when there are transit options available. By easing parking restrictions in some of these targeted areas, a more diverse style of housing can be built that can be more affordable, promote more social interaction within the community, and help encourage use of our available multimodal transit investments. Both Resilient Houston and Houston Climate Action Plan establish specific goals for reducing parking requirements and allowing for context-sensitive rules. Our recommendation is for market-based parking to be available for residential developments within a half-mile distance, about a 5 to 10 minute walk, to existing rail stations, high-frequency bus stops, boost stops, transit stations, park and ride locations, and Blue Route bus stops within opportunity zones, and a quarter mile for high-comfort bike paths, trails, and B-cycle stations. The city has invested so much into our existing multimodal network. Let's encourage more households to find this as an alternative. And for those that rely on your vehicle, there are those who would prefer other options, which when given, reduces overall traffic congestion. We are not talking about commercial developments here. Any discussions about potentially expanding further the existing market-based parking area, which consists of downtown, much of Midtown, and Edo, is not on the table at this time. For the 4 housing types to be discussed, market-based parking is permitted when within the specified distances. Second dwelling unit is an additional dwelling unit on a single-family lot that's located above a garage or within a separate structure from the main house, also called accessory dwelling units, granny flats, garage apartments, etc. This type of development is currently allowed in Houston and is popular for those who want to add rental income onto their property while remaining on site, or to have 2 rental units on a single lot, fitting easily into the existing neighborhood scale. Current rules allow 2 dwelling units sharing 1 lot to be classified as single-family residential. For the current rules, if proposing a duplex, there is no cap on either unit size, and if proposing a detached second unit, the ordinance limits one of the unit sizes to not more than 900 square feet. Why should those be treated differently? The proposed change would eliminate the maximum size of a second dwelling unit, so there wouldn't be a difference between attached and detached for the unit size. Likewise, currently the ordinance requires the first home to provide 2 off-street parking spaces and the second detached unit to provide 1 additional space, or if a duplex, 2 parking spaces per unit. We are proposing that the parking requirements for the units be tied to the unit size instead of a one-size-fits-all approach. The minimum parking requirements for the first structure would be 1 space for a unit that is 1,500 square feet or less, and for units greater than 1,500 square feet, 2 spaces. For the second unit, the number of additional parking spaces would be 0 for a second unit. The size of less than or equal to 1,000 square feet would be 1, or for unit size for the second unit, for a size of equal to or less than 1,000 square feet would be 0 additional parking space. For 1 additional parking space, the unit size would be between 1,000 and 1,500, or plus 2 for a unit size over 1,500. For example, if the site is proposing 2 units at 1,000 square feet or less, only one parking space would be required on site. They can provide more if they want to. If both units are over 1,500 square feet, then 4 spaces would be required. If the first unit is 1,200 square feet and the second unit is 1,500 square feet, then then 2 parking spaces would be required on site, just a total of 2. These are all minimum requirements and not based on proximity to transit, but instead are associated to a growing dynamic of 1- and 2-person households. When occupying smaller dwelling units, we propose an option to allow a reduction in parking to encourage less of the site area to be used for paving if desired. In conjunction with encouraging more second dwelling units, the Planning Department was awarded an AARP grant to provide funding for an ADU design competition, which was held late last year to encourage construction of ADUs throughout the city. Submitted plans are now published in a book, and residents are able to use the designs to help in the permitting process for their own ADU. You can download a free copy on our website or request a hard copy for a minimal fee to cover printing and shipping. This ADU design book has won 2 Best Practices Gold Awards from APA Texas chapter and APA Texas Houston section. Narrow lot development is a single-family home located on a narrow lot that fronts a street. Narrow lots could also develop with a shared driveway or flag lot configuration. Neighborhoods across the city are seeing these types of housing as existing lots subdivide into narrow front-loading lots with direct vehicular access from the street via very wide driveways. The ordinance change we are proposing is to require vehicular access via alley or shared driveway when possible. These are some of the types of development that can occur on narrow lots. The primary goals of promoting rear or shared vehicular access on narrow lots are to increase pedestrian safety, preserve on-street parking, and reduce the impact to the stormwater detention in the public right-of-way by eliminating or reducing the number of driveway curb cuts, a source of vehicle, pedestrian, or cyclist conflict, and continual and repeated breaks in our open ditch streets with smaller capacity culverts. The space between driveways is sometimes only 6 to 8 feet, which isn't enough room for anything. Just like the second dwelling unit type just discussed, these are eligible for the parking requirements to be based on the unit size. Minimum of 1 space for units 1,500 square feet or less, or 2 spaces for units greater than 1,500 square feet. The narrow lot recommendations are separated into 5 categories based on access, lot width, and the overall site size when proposing a subdivision of land. This table is helpful for the following slides. On the Let's Talk Houston website, you can download the narrow lot development details available in both tabular and flowchart styles. So depending on the lot width, the cutoff being 40 feet, or the proposed subdivision size, cutoff is 10,000 square feet for lots with frontage on 2 streets, either corner or front and rear, or 15,000 square feet for all other lots, will determine the type of vehicular access permitted. If the lot has frontage on an alley, then when possible, vehicular access will be required from the alley. The when possible phrase is for improved alleys or lots on a corner with an unimproved alley which can be improved. We know that there had been difficulties in obtaining alley construction permits through Public Works, and we are working with them to facilitate an easier process that still meets their concerns about drainage and construction materials, but allows for this product of housing, which can bring significant benefits to the pedestrian realm and infrastructure. The incentives for utilizing the alley are increased density from the current maximum of 27 units per acre to 35 units per acre, and reduced building lines along the public street of 0 to 5 feet, still maintaining the required safe distances from overhead power lines when present. When not taking access from an alley, with lots with a width less than 40 feet and with a total subdivision size of greater than 15,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet on lots with 2 frontages on public streets, vehicular access must be provided by either shared driveway, flag lot, or PAE, a permanent access easement, which is a type of private street with a width of 28 feet. Driveways from the lots to the public street would not be permitted, only shared access. For side or rear loading lots, units along the public street should front the street with doors and provide pedestrian connections to the sidewalk. The incentives for these type of development are the same as for the alley access development. When not taking access from an alley, with lots with a width less than 40 feet and with a total subdivision size of less than or equal to 15,000 square feet, vehicular access must be provided by either shared driveway, flag lot, or PAE, just like the previous, or by a common drive between two lots. The additional incentives of increased density and reduced building line are only available when choosing the shared access developments. A common drive is one driveway approach at the street shared between two front-loading lots. The common drive approach is a maximum 24 feet, 12 feet for each lot. The driveway, once within private property, can separate and flare into two separate driveways or remain combined. If the subdivision is 3 lots, then 2 of the lots will be required to have a common drive while the third has its own. The last category of narrow lots are for lots greater than 40 feet in width that are not capable of rear or side access. These lots are permitted individual driveway approaches as long as there is at least 22 feet of uninterrupted curb space to allow for on-street parking if 1/3 of the structure facing the street is habitable space, i.e. not just a garage door as the ground floor facade. The primary structure can have a setback of 10 feet, while the garage or carport face must be at least 19 feet from the right-of-way. I know this is a lot of information that bleeds together all at once, but like I said, a flowchart is available online in addition to the full housing recommendations from the Action Committee. And of course, and if there are questions, please ask. Moving on to the next type, courtyard-style development is a cluster of single-family homes located around a privately managed shared courtyard, sometimes called a pocket neighborhood. Our current development rules do not permit the style of development, but is increasingly in demand in many cities throughout the country. This is a fee simple type of development. There would be no minimum lot size or width and no maximum density. This style is perfectly catered to smaller homes. Lots do not have to have frontage on a public street, private street, or shared driveway, which the current ordinance requires. Instead, lots can have sole frontage along the courtyard. The courtyard space can be one conglomerated piece or separated and spread around the development as long as the minimum size of each courtyard is maintained for usability among residents, a minimum of 12 feet wide and 480 square feet in area, with at least 20 feet between structures facing the courtyard. Based on the number of lots is how to determine the minimum size beyond that base minimum at 150 square feet per lot. Also, at least half of the lots within the subdivision needs to have frontage along the courtyard, or a courtyard. The maximum property depth of 150 feet from a public street is in place by the Fire Marshal Office request. If the subdivision has multiple street frontages, then the 150 feet depth is from each street face. A reduced building line of 5 feet along the local street is permitted, and the homes are required to provide an active facade onto the courtyard and/or street by way of doors, windows, porches, etc., with a direct pedestrian connection. The maximum height restriction of 30 feet is to keep the development to a neighborhood scale. This development type has a minimum of 1 parking space per lot and will allow the option to have the parking be within a common parking area decoupled from the lot. Parking is not permitted between the structures and the street. This slide is a helpful way to graphically show what I just walked through, and it also shows that the courtyard style development can be in any configuration and size, from a subdivision of a single existing lot to multiple lots or an entire block, with endless site planning possibilities. And here are some built examples. just to get an idea of functional courtyard spaces. The final type is multi-unit residential, or MUR, a triplex, multiple duplexes, a fourplex, or multiplex with no more than 8 dwelling units in whatever configuration. This development type would reintroduce triplexes and quadplexes that were popular in Houston around the mid-century, such as in Montrose. Over time, our development rules have made constructing these types of housing more cumbersome or infeasible. We hope that this could reintroduce small-scale multifamily housing in Houston and provide additional rental housing on the market. Per the current ordinance, when a property has more than 2 dwelling units, it is classified as multifamily, with no differentiation between small-scale multifamily housing and high-rise or garden-style apartments of more than 100 units. We are proposing to create a separate classification of MUR for properties with only 3 to 8 dwelling units. The site size should not be greater than 15,000 square feet and have at least 40 feet in width. Like the courtyard style, there is a maximum property depth of 150 feet from the street and the building height of 30 feet. Like the second dwelling unit and narrow lot types previously discussed, we also propose that the minimum parking requirements be based on unit size, 1 space for units 1,500 square feet or less, and 2 spaces for units greater than 1,500. The objective of this new multifamily designation is to allow for right-size standards that will encourage density safely within the residential scale. This is an example of many configurations possible, such as older style quadplexes, groupings of duplexes, a triplex with garage apartments, 8 single-family rental homes, or whatever the site and the market determines, up to 8 units. In addition to the proposed ordinance changes, we are continuing to work with Public Works so that other developmental code changes that relates to these proposals will all go together to be enacted simultaneously and not conflict with each other. The amendment to the current development code is being written right now based on the work of the Livable Places Action Committee, user comments and suggestions on Let's Talk Houston, and the many community presentations and engagement that we have completed. We're still taking input, so it's not too late to share your thoughts. So please visit Livable Places on Let's Talk Houston to get detailed information on the Action Committee's recommendations as discussed here and to provide your feedback. You can use the QR code shown to access the website or visit using the website letstalkhouston.org/livable-places or the bit.ly link. And I'm ready for questions or comments. And be advised, there will be a shorter second part to the presentation next, presented by Savita to discuss proposed buffering amendments.
Do we have any questions? Looks like there is hand raises. The first hand raise I see is Peter Friedman.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to thank the Planning Commission, I'm sorry, the Planning Department on everything they've done to put this all together. They've been working with the Livable Places Action Committee for a while. I'm a committee member. I really appreciate everything they've done. There's a lot of work that's gone into it to get to this point. So thank you all very much.
You're welcome, and thank you, committee member. You have helped through this process, so appreciate that.
It looks like there's some chats. Is someone?
Yes, I see a comment about lighting, which really pertains to the next topic we're going to discuss. There is a question, how does this work with deed restrictions? Tammy, you want to take that?
So everything that we proposed is available to all of Houston and our extraterritorial jurisdiction as long as the deed restrictions permit it. So if there is a neighborhood that have deed restrictions for one single family residential home, none of that, well, except for the single family homes, would be applicable. Or if there are deed restrictions that have a minimum lot size established, that will prevail over anything that we've proposed.
Awesome. Another comment, deed restrictions can increase limits. I think this is again about lighting, pointing lighting directly at the word structures. Another question is, will the minimum size of shared driveway change?
Not at this time. The shared driveways are still 18-foot wide shared driveways or a 16-foot wide performance standard if you meet certain criteria. So the width of the shared driveway is not being proposed to change at this time.
Awesome, thank you. Do we have any other questions from any of our attendees?
There was a point of clarity, Tammy. Deed restrictions do take precedent. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
So is it a question that we have is IRC or IBC for 3 to 8 units? You want to take that or you want me to answer?
Yeah, so far it's still IBC, but our director has been working with Director of Public Works, Margaret Wallace Brown with Carol Haddock, to try to see if we can actually amend the building code and residential code to get that small scale multifamily done safely to be under the IRC. Right now it's IBC, but we are having those conversations to have it still be built safely, but to create a category that would be in IRC instead of the full-blown commercial code. So
if I may add to that, thank you, Tammy, that is correct information. So right now, if you want to continue to build these 3 to 8 units under IRC, the one idea is to have multiple duplexes instead of having them all as one structure. So that is an idea that is being thought about. So that's something you can consider. Another question we have, again, this is related to restrictions, is does this have any impact on the minimum lot size areas?
no, so if there are areas that are under minimum lot size ordinances that are approved by city council already, those will still take precedent. Those are ordinances that will prevail or supersede any of our just base ordinance recommendations.
Okay, great. Another question, any proposed changes to the current detention requirements for these developments? You want to answer that?
I think you should take that, Savita.
Okay, great. So yes, we are working with Public Works on the proposed detention for the existing detention requirements to see how we want to encourage the properties to take rear access. So that is in the works. Especially we are discussing properties taking access from alleys, and also we're discussing how we want to encourage more shared drives or common drives. So what kind of incentives we can provide that may include some changes to detention requirements. And that will also happen simultaneously as we take these changes to the Planning Commission and the City Council. There will be simultaneous changes to IDM. Okay, next question. For cottage courts, will fire separation distances still apply for detached units? And I think the answer is yes, but Tammy, do you want to take that?
Yes, so if you think about it, these are still individual lots. So they're single family homes. So they would be under the IRC, but that if you don't want to do any fire rating, I think the IRC was recently changed to be 5 feet. It doesn't mean that it has to be 5 feet. You can go 0. You can do full townhome, like row house townhome with 0 feet. It just would require fire rated construction. So it is definitely IRC because these are single family lots, just not off of a street. And so if you do the fire rated construction that would be needed by the IRC, then you can go shorter than, I think, the 5 feet separation without having fire rated construction.
Awesome. Okay, any other questions?
There's a raised hand.
There is a raised hand. Sorry, I missed that. Can you see who it is, Lindsay?
Yes,
Yes, it's me. Yes, it's me. I had a question in the chat, but it may have been overlooked. But the question that I had, there was mention in this presentation that some of the proposed changes were also seen in other markets, I guess in other states and places. Some of this that was shared in the presentation was new to me. I was curious what other markets or states or areas that you've seen these proposed changes in, and are they similar to the Houston climate wise, structural layout of how this city works? Just curious where you've seen these proposed changes in other places and if they're similar to Houston. Thank you.
Um, we did look at other cities, and there are a lot of other cities who are looking towards their single family definition itself, and also encouraging more courtyard style developments. So there are a lot of cities. There is California, Austin, some cities in Virginia. I'm not getting the name of the city, but there are a lot of other cities who are looking towards missing middle, changing the definitions. So I think overall there is population growth everywhere, and every city is looking towards more missing middle homes, and that's the concept that we are proposing also, is to encourage more small scale multifamily and encourage more naturally occurring affordable housing units. And that's why we are changing the rules related to ADUs and encouraging more smaller homes with the courtyard style development. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it did. Some of those markets I don't think are quite similar to how Houston is structured, but I think I just need to do a little bit more research to get a better understanding. But thank you.
You're welcome. The next question is, will the right-of-way need to be improved to infill areas with ditches for update to new sidewalk requirements? Will the city assist with any of these infrastructure improvements? That's a good question. Tammy, do you want to take a stab or you want me to answer? So the right-of-way improvements is the infrastructure improvements is something that the public works handles. What we are talking about is the improvements in the, or when the development happens, we want to encourage the development to happen the way that will encourage more affordability, walkability, and equity. So the purpose of all of these changes is to encourage the development to happen in the way we want it to benefit the city. Yes, there are open-ditch streets and the density is increasing in everywhere, including along the open-ditch streets, but the infrastructure has to be brought up to speed, and that public works handles.
And on the sidewalk front, it's an amendment to the sidewalk ordinance, chapter 40, is going before city council. Do we have a date yet, Savita?
Tentatively, it's still not scheduled yet,
Okay.
but tentatively it's mid-December.
Okay. Which would allow for a fee in lieu of option for the sidewalk ordinance.
There was another question of the estimated timeline for these changes to be voted on and go into effect.
Go ahead, Tam.
Yeah, so our goal is to have this before City Council March of next year, so March of 2023. So we're drafting the housing recommendation as the draft ordinance language right now, and then it goes to legal, then it goes to the Planning Commission for public comment period, and then ultimately to City Council for the public comment period and the final decision.
There's
yes,
another
thank you.
comment about
yes, go
paid
ahead.
parking. Does any of this proposal include paying for a parking space?
Say that again, Lindsay, please.
For parking, does any of this proposal include paying for parking spaces?
That's an interesting idea. No, right now what we are focused on is right sizing the parking requirements, especially when it is smaller units. The right sizing is to allow more homes to happen where there is only need or required parking of one space. And if it is in the vicinity of other modes of transportation, we want to encourage use of those investments city and metro is making. So we are encouraging market-based parking in areas that are transit served. Other than that, there is no introduction of any paid parking concept.
And our goal is to reduce the minimums. It doesn't mean that what is actually going to be constructed would be any different, or, like you can always go, like if I were a 4-portion household and I had teenagers, and so I have 4 cars, I would be looking for a home that would meet those needs. If I'm a 1-person household and I just have 1 vehicle, then I don't necessarily need to try to find a home that has space for so many vehicles when it's just me. And so that's the idea, is just the options to create something that the market can then decide where it wants to be.
You have a hand raised by Mr. Curtis Davis.
Mr. Curtis Davis? We can't hear you speak. I see the question in the chat. Can you clarify the 2 to 3 story or 30 feet height?
There's Curtis. Which one do we want to do first? We're not able to hear you.
I'm sorry that we can't hear you.
Feel free to put your question in the chat.
Yeah, please place your question in the chat. Meanwhile, Tammy, can you answer the question about 2 to 3 story or 30 feet height for MURs and for courtyard style developments?
So we're drafting the ordinance language right now. What we are trying to figure out is how we're going to do that 30 feet height. So your recommendations that would actually be really helpful. Would we do it from the roof pitch? Would we do it from like the average roof slope, or if it's a flat, like there's so many ways to get that measurement. And so that's actually, we're trying to work that out right now. So, help us if you have recommendations.
And a lot of the 30 feet idea is to make sure that the fire safety conditions are met and that fire is able to serve those upper stories. So fire has recommended that we limit the height to 30 feet. And also our goal was to maintain it neighborhood scale homes. So that's the concept. There is a comment here thanking us for thanking the planning department and catching up with other cities for livability and quality of life. So thanks for the comment. Can we get a copy of the presentation? Yes, we can provide it to, we can actually post it on our Let's Talk Houston webpage as a link, so everybody who's interested can view it. Another comment, maybe limit the number of stories. That's just a comment. Another comment, market-based parking is not a quality of life option for Houston, Texas. Thank you.
There was a comment around mobility, just a point of clarity. Will residents be forced to use a certain form of transportation with these developments?
No. It's an option. So what we are saying is there is no minimum parking required when there is other modes of transit. But whenever somebody is looking for a home, if there is no parking and you need parking, then you probably will look for homes that have that availability. And if developers are proposing homes and they're building homes, they can choose to provide that additional parking. It's just that there is no city minimum. When we say market-based parking, that means city doesn't have a minimum number. You can provide as many as you want. So that's the idea.
Are there any other questions related to Tammy's portion of the Livable Places presentation?
Say that again, Lindsay. I missed that.
I was asking if there were any questions, so a few just popped in the chat.
Another question, will open driveway areas qualify as parking as opposed to enclosed garages in meeting the parking requirement for single family homes and ADUs?
Yes, so that's actually allowed now. I mean, you don't have to have a garage or carport. You just have to have it off street. And as long as, so like if you're thinking ADU, where you can't have your parking space be part of the access that you would need to drive through to get to the other dwelling unit. So as long as it has enough space to be able to move around, but absolutely you can use just the flat work areas as the parking space, as the required parking.
Is there going to be any additions where we can use permeable area to also serve as one of the parking places in any particular fashion?
Yeah, as long as it meets the IDM requirements from Public Works, have at it.
Unrelated comment, when will the PSEFI presentation be available? We will follow up on that to make sure the PSEFI presentation is available on our website. Thank you for the reminder.
Mr. Davis put his comment in the chat. The Livable Places process focuses on regulatory concerns. However, the ability to realize the various goals will require ongoing interdepartmental, political, and community stakeholder coordination.
Thank you
Yes,
for the
it will.
comment. That is true.
I don't see any other comments or hand raises for this portion.
Okay, great. I think that's, I guess that concludes the first part of the presentation. I'll go ahead and start. Tammy, can you share the screen from here, please, while I do mine?
I am, yes.
Piece. So right now, this portion, in the second portion, we are going to talk about the residential proposed buffering amendments, which we presented to the Planning Commission already, and Planning Commission will bring them back to the Planning Commission. We concluded the comment period on these proposed amendments, and we are looking at the ordinance and making sure we are looking at them with the light of the proposed the comments that we received, and we are coming back to the Planning Commission on December 1st. So if you are interested to learn more or to make a public comment on these amendments, please make sure to come to the Planning Commission on December 1st at 2:30 p.m. So I'm going to do a quick presentation. The proposed buffering amendments are one of the first things Livable Places Action Committee worked on after hearing community concerns. These amendments include changes to the residential buffering standards, which is the distance between the homes and the tall structures, garage screening standards. So how will the garages be screened from not shedding light onto the abutting homes? Lighting fixture standards. Again, the purpose of these amendments is to make sure that the lights on the exterior walls or the pole lighting is directed appropriately. And dumpster screening is to make sure that the dumpsters or bulk containers are appropriately screened from view along the public street or view from residential homes. So I'll present them one by one. Next slide, please. The purpose of the residential buffering standards change is to maintain a balance between the high density development and all existing residential developments. Current buffering ordinance has requirements for high-rise structures to provide a buffer when abutting single-family residential lots of 3,500 square feet or larger. However, in order to maintain equity, we are proposing some changes. So the changes to the amendments are high-rise structures that are taller than 75 feet to the highest habitable floor must provide a buffer of 30 or 40 feet based upon if their property is fronting on a local street or a collector street. They must provide buffer not only from single family residential homes that are on larger than 3,500 square feet homes, but they have to buffer even from all single family residential homes and also from multi-unit residential developments, which is that 3 to 8 units that we discussed a few minutes ago. We also introduced an additional category called the mid-rise buildings that are taller than 65 feet to the top of the structure that must provide a buffer of 15 feet from all single family residential and multi-unit residential development if they meet the criteria. And the buffer is applicable only if the property fronts on a local street. Next slide, please. Here is an illustration of current buffering standards for developments meeting all the compliance criteria. It shows the 30 or 40 feet buffer based on whether the proposed development is along a local or collector street. And you can see that the current ordinance only applies for lots larger than 3,500 square feet. Next slide, please. On this slide, the two illustrations on the screen show the proposed distance separation standards for high-rise and mid-rise structures. In the exhibit on the left illustrates the standards for high-rise structures, and there are no changes to that 30 or 40 feet buffer, but the change is what do you buffer from? You buffer from all single family and also from the multi-unit residential uses. On the right side exhibit, it illustrates that the standard for mid-rise structures solely fronting on local street, and when the structure is taller than 65 feet, the buffer is 15 feet. And it is required to buffer from, again, all single family residential and multi-unit residential uses. Within both the buffer areas, no structures or covered parking are allowed, but vehicular access and surface parking is allowed. In the next slide, the purpose of this, the next slide, we're going to talk about garage screening, which is the second topic. The purpose of this amendment is to protect all residential developments from light that comes out of car headlights and also light that comes from garage ceiling lights. As part of the change or part of the amendments, all parking garage faces that abut residential development or are across the street from residential development must provide an exterior cover of 50 inches for all tiers where parking occurs. Also, we introduced additional requirements for parking garage structures when they abut a public street or existing residential development so that no light trespass is created. So for this, for the internal garage ceiling lights, there is two options. Either focus all of your internal ceiling lights appropriately and provide a photometric plan, or provide full screening for the garages. Next slide, please. So here is an illustration. You can see the current garage screening requirement showing 42 inches opaque screen. And you can see that there is only the 42 inches is only required if it is abutting single family residential, and the single family residential must be located within 30 feet. And the screening material is not required 50 feet or higher. In the right side illustration, you can see the proposed change where the opaque screening is 50 inches and it is required on all faces that are abutting residential development or when there is residential across the street. And there is no 30 feet distance between the homes and the garage structure. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see two images that showing the garage screening requirements. On the left, you can see structures with one structure with full screening versus another one with only the opaque exterior cover of 42 inches. On the right side image, you can see one structure which has both types of screening. It has the opaque exterior cover of 42 inches, but it also did a full screening. So just wanted to give you a glimpse of what it will look like when I talk about full screening or the opaque exterior cover. Next slide, please. Now, the third item is lighting fixture standards. The purpose of this amendment is to minimize light trespass and keep direct light from shining onto abutting residential properties or public streets. As part of the change, we're recommending that all outdoor fixtures, be it wall-mounted or pole-mounted on commercial developments, when abutting residential development or abutting a street, must be fully enclosed in the fixture housing. They must not create light trespass more than 0.2 foot candles when measured at grade on the property line, and they could be full cutoff fixtures. The lights must have maximum correlated color temperature of 3500 Kelvin and a minimum color rendering index of 70. So these are specifications for the fixtures. Next slide, so here is an illustration of the current standards and the proposed change. You can see how we recommended that the 30 feet distance requirement be removed, and all of the wall mounted fixtures, even though they're further than 30 feet from residential developments, they still have to make sure there is no light trespass more than 0.2 foot candles measured at the property line. Next slide, please. Here is an example images. On the left side, you can see that there is parking lot lights that are shining right next to the bedroom windows, versus the image to the right can show you that the lights are focused downwards. Those are full cutoff lights. And those are the kind of lighting we're talking about, is the light has to be focused downwards so that the area needed to be lit must be lit, but it should not spread across the property line to shine on the abutting residential developments. Next slide, please. Okay, so the last topic is bulk container screening standards. The purpose of this amendment is to protect all residential developments from the view of bulk containers and to improve the view along all public streets. The change is that we are requiring screening for all bulk containers when they are adjacent to residential development or when they are adjacent to all public streets. The current standard is that bulk container screening is only required on the address side of the property. So if the bulk container is located on the adjacent street or the second street the property fronts on, then there is no screening required. Here in the image on the left, you can see that that's the back of this back street where the property doesn't get the address from, so there is no screening required. However, we propose that all along all public streets, if bulk containers are located, they must be screened. So that's the change. With that, I just wanted to mention what our timing is on the buffering ordinance. Like I mentioned, the buffering ordinance changes will go to the Planning Commission for a vote on December 1st, and they will be presented to the Council Committee on December 13th, and off we go to the City Council end of December. For more information, questions, or if you're interested in any pilot projects, please make sure to write to us at livableplaces@houstontx.gov or call us at 832-393-6600. We'll be more than happy to consider any pilot projects under the proposed ideas if you're interested. All of this information and the proposed recommendations, they're all available on letstalkhouston.org/livable-places. with that, I conclude my presentation and we're ready for questions. And thank you all for joining us and to learn about Livable Places recommendations. We request that all of you engage actively on our Let's Talk Houston website and provide your input. Thank you.
Your first hand raise is Deborah Moran.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Debbie Moran, and there's so little good lighting. I just wanted to just let people know that if you want to see what a warmer white LED light looks like pointed downward, we have a website called softlighthouston.com, and there's a gallery page that shows lots of comparisons. I've only seen maybe 5 examples in Houston. They're all pictured there, and I've also seen some good examples in other cities. So I just want to let people know this is healthier to live with. The 3500 K limit is a little bit on the warm side of white, but it's good enough to get really good acuity where that's needed. So it covers any place that is needed. But if you can go as warm as possible near residential, you still meet the color rendering requirements because amber LEDs show color a lot better than our previous amber high pressure sodium lighting did. And I just want to point people out so that they can see what that lighting looks like when it's used at various intensities. And it's a matter of what's not to like. And the other thing is, if you're having any difficulty with your police officers, we've been photographing bright light at the sites of auto pedestrian accidents. And that includes the horrific dragging death that just happened on Westheimer. I went there, and sure enough, the part of that crosswalk that the man would have been coming from, there were 2 parking lots lights on the north side of Westheimer pointed directly at the driver. And although he may have been able to see the part of the crosswalk where he actually hit the man, he would not have seen him coming in advance. I went to see for myself. That part of the crosswalk was blocked by glare. So we are photographing those sites. We have lots of them now, and that's really helpful in talking to your police officers about lighting. And thanks so much for addressing this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments.
Your next question is from Jeff.
Does the bulk screening requirement apply to completed residential developments under construction? Do we have to screen in a temporary dumpster during construction? So to answer your first question, already constructed buildings will not be required to retrofit. It is for all new structures that will go to permitting after the ordinance gets passed. To answer your next question, do we have to screen a temporary dumpster? No, temporary dumpsters are already an exception in Chapter 39, so no, you don't have to screen those.
Jeff had his hand raised.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Jeff?
you. I posted my message in the comments and you answered it perfectly. I don't need my hand raised. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions related to the second piece? I do not hear any questions and I don't see any hand raises. Is that all, everyone?
Peter
Okay,
Friedman
Peter
has his
Friedman,
hand
yes,
raised.
sir.
Hi, Savita. I'm sorry if you said this before, but I missed it. On the first part of the presentation, when do you think those will go into effect?
We're planning to take them to the City Council March of next year. End of February, beginning of March is the goal that we want to get them done.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Comments?
Deborah has her hand raised.
Yes,
Yes,
yes, I just wanted to ask if you would take a look at the 5 principles for responsible lighting. You have a great upper limit in your guidelines, but there are 5 principles that were jointly released by the Illuminating Engineering Society and the International Dark Sky Association, which could just serve as a guide to people to figure out how to use the least amount of light that they need for their purpose, so that they're steered in that direction. And if we could just, it's short, if we could put that into the guidelines, that would be really terrific, just as a guide.
Thank you. I did look at the 5 principles and thank you for your message. I looked at it and we are in discussions to see what portion of the comments and what can be addressed and can be part of the ordinance and what can be just informational. So I appreciate your comments. And I welcome you to come to the Planning Commission on December 1st.
December 1st. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay, I guess there are no other questions. So I am thinking all of you will think about doing pilot projects. And if you do have questions, want us to consider any site plans, anything, please do send them my way. I do have some people who have reached out with their site plans to have them considered as pilot projects. And it will give us an opportunity to evaluate what we are proposing way ahead of them actually becoming ordinances. So I appreciate any feedback that we receive on Let's Talk Houston. And thank you all for joining us. And have a nice rest of the day.
Davida, I'm dropping the chat again for anyone seeking credits for AIA to make sure they have entered their information.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay, for doing that. And yes, if you are interested in getting credits for being part of this webinar, please sign up with your AIA member information.